Welcome back to Surrender Live. We're back for a second episode, and I'm once again joined with my buddy Shaun, as today we will be talking about The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Glad to be here, guys.
This is a new Netflix series that's just come out recently. This is by Mike Flanagan, who did The Haunting of Hill House. I think it was about a year ago, maybe it was a year and a half ago, which
In
I,
2020 terms, it feels like 7 years ago. But yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
yeah, but it's something we both enjoyed. It's actually we won't be doing any spoilers at all for The Haunting of Hill House, but this will be very spoiler heavy for The Haunting of Bly Manor. So please do not listen to this if you have not already seen the show. It's only 9 episodes, and highly recommend going out and watching it before you watch this or listen to this. Perfect. And John, we can talk too about our general impressions of this compared to Hill House. I just want to make sure we're not spoiling plot points. So that sounds good?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's only fair to people are going to naturally compare the two. So
Sure.
makes sense.
So going back to the beginning a little bit, I think you're the first person that got me into Mike Flanagan's work with Oculus way back
Mm,
in the day. And
yes.
I really enjoyed that one. I know you really enjoyed. That's why you recommended it. And then, of course, we were both shocked to see that he was doing Hill House, and I really enjoyed that one, and I think you did too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was one of my favorite shows that year.
Perfect. And then, he was doing Doctor Sleep too, right? So, and I know you're a huge fan of that movie. I've yet to watch it, so I will probably be doing The Shining and then Doctor Sleep director's cut soon, so you and I can do a review of
Yeah,
that one as well.
I will
Um,
sing it from the mountaintops. Doctor Sleep. If anyone listening to this hasn't seen it, go out and see that movie right away. It was my favorite movie of 2019.
but yeah, this one here, let's talk about Bly Manor though. So,
Sure.
overall, I came into this one with a lot of preconceived notions. I thought it was going to be a lot more the same from the Haunting of Hill House, and to a degree, I did think there was some of that. So when I went into this one, I was expecting the same ghost story type of experience. It did have more of a whimsical fairy tale vibe with the
Hmm.
narrator, which was a little bit different from the get go. But immediately in that first episode, I started spotting a couple of the ghosts, and it became kind of like what the show, like the game that my wife and I did with Hill House was, hey, spot the ghost, it's very interesting because his you can tell when Flanagan frames a scene if the person's sitting like a quarter of the way into the frame from the left in these shows, typically take a look somewhere on the right side of the frame and you're going to find a ghost in the background or something like that. And there, to be fair, there was a lot of that in the first episode, like a lot, like the plague doctor ghost I saw like 3 or 4 times. It just it's so weird because it tapered off after the first. I mean, it became less frequent after that first episode, and it was to the point where I did find halfway through the series I stopped trying to spot the ghost. Like every
Same here.
once in a while I would see one, but it wasn't like the same. I wasn't coming to the series for the same experience I was in the previous series. I was coming to the series. I guess my point is it was a subversive in the best ways, in my opinion, in that regard, because I wasn't watching it to be creeped out as much anymore. I was more watching it towards just to see how this mystery unraveled and how the outcome of it all for these characters. Whereas in Hill House, I did watch it for that creep factor the whole way through. So it
Hmm.
is a bit of interesting for that. What were your thoughts on the whole ghosts and how that whole thing worked out?
So yeah, I mean, it was when I watched Haunting at Hill House, it was something that I didn't pick up on right away because I had watched it right away when the series pretty much first came out. So there wasn't this buzz about things being in the background, and then all of a sudden I started seeing them here and there, and then I started looking more, and it became this fun slash creepy kind of game, and it definitely added this kind of haunting atmosphere. And it's so funny that you say that it kind of tapered off for you in this show, in Bly Manor, and I think that has to do with Flanagan himself because he only directed that first episode of this series. and it's the one that I noticed the most ghosts in. So maybe it's just kind of his thing, his shtick, and maybe the other directors didn't do it as often. But yeah, it definitely tapered off for me as well.
That's interesting 'cause I had no clue he didn't direct the whole thing. I thought he did direct the whole thing. So kudos to them for consistency in the show.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, overall, different type of experience than what I was expecting. I
Mhm.
wasn't expecting the ghost story to kind of shift halfway through and become kind of, a love story. They say that at the end, I do think it really did become that, towards
Mhm.
multiple relationships, not only through Danny and Jamie, but also too through Owen and Hannah.
Yeah.
Um, and,
Everybody's in love.
yeah,
You're not allowed
or
to be single and be at Bly Manor.
yeah, or yeah, it's true. And Peter and Rebecca, and of course Henry and Dominic's wife, Charlotte.
Yep.
So that was interesting for me. That it was really interesting that they were able to shift that. As me, a big horror guy, right? And I come in wanting one thing, and I ended up enjoying something else. Now, I will say I'm willing to be taken on that ride. For my wife, halfway through the series, she completely started losing steam on it because it stopped being about the things that she liked about Hill House. So she was actually pretty disappointed, and I was getting to the point where she was asking me each time we put it on, how many more episodes of the show do we have? So it's
Oh,
kind of it's
yeah.
kind of funny how I was willing to be taken on that journey, and I think she was just happy to see that journey wrapped up because it wasn't what it said it was on the box, and that was
Right.
that killed it for her. While for me, I was pleasantly surprised, and you know how I am with this notion of things need to subvert our expectations these days. I'm typically not happy with that. I believe that when you have established properties, by subverting people's expectations, you're kind of poking your fans in the eye a little
Yep.
bit, and you have to be really careful how you do it. This is a case where I feel it was done right,
Mhm.
because it made me appreciate the story in a way that I normally wouldn't. What are your thoughts on the tonal shift, on the second half of the series?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with you on that. Y Before I even started watching any of this, I have to admit, I went into it expecting more of the same, more of the Hill House, which is definitely, creepy, scary, kind of thrilling type of TV, and this was in the end, especially, it was definitely more whimsical, right? More of
Right.
a love story, a fairy tale, um, and it does make that shift halfway through. Not that there's not scary moments or anything like that through the entire series, but you can definitely feel they're leaning heavy into the romance aspect of it, and I loved it. I thought it was something different. I thought it was fresh. I was really happy that they didn't just try to rehash the same story again in a different location. So yeah, kudos to Flanagan and everybody else behind this series because they definitely surprised me, but in a good way.
Yeah, and I think that the actors did a great job with that too. I really was bought in to, I would say, almost all the relationships. I feel like Jamie and Danny had a great relationship. I felt it came about in a very organic way. It didn't
Hmm.
happen immediately, and then we see everything was kind of earned every step of the way. Um, this was mystery box writing, right? And I think that
Yeah.
this is a case, and so was Hell House. It was mystery box writing, but um, a lot of shows, it started in the late 2000s, I think, where a lot of shows had that mystery box where they'd set up a bunch of mysteries and then they'd do a flashback to start explaining a couple of the mysteries, which give you context on the episodes going forward. And not everybody does it well. I feel like a lot of shows have really suffered because they've taken on this tactic and they employ it terribly. I
Hmm.
feel that Flanagan does it mostly really well. I liked his resolution of his mysteries in this more than I liked his resolution of his mysteries in Hill House, which was interesting because in Hill
Mm.
House, for me, those last couple of episodes were not my favorite. I didn't hate them or anything. I still enjoyed them, but I did feel it was a little messy, and there was
Yeah.
some of those threads were completely messed. Like I told you back then, I'm not going to say what they are, but there was a couple of threads where I was like, okay, well, why did that happen, or why did that ghost?
Right.
Why was that ghost there?
Right.
Here,
And one of the characters kind of gets ruined a little bit,
Right.
So it's just like, why would you do that to the character that you created? But yeah,
Right.
I
But
get you.
but in here though, I feel like it was different. We had so very specifically for the ghosts, we the plague doctor, we find out, three-quarters of the way through the series who the plague doctor is. Um,
Yeah,
and it's not, some people might see that's not great, payoff and all that, but I felt like the plague doctor mask and the image of him, was very creepy.
yeah,
I remember specifically seeing the soldier in the foyer area first, and then Henry mentions the soldier when he was a kid.
yes,
So, and then of course, even when they have the big reveal, and Peter is upset about losing his face, and he pulls up the girl in the dress. I don't want to look like her, and then we find out that
mm-hmm,
she was the sister of the main girl.
yes.
So I felt like all of the ghost stories there had a story to them. It was a payoff for each one of those, a lot cleaner than it was, in Hill
Oh,
House, where they were just trying to get a creepy rise out of you. Here, they all had a story for them.
absolutely. Everything is tied up in a bow at the end of this, which is so rare for ghost stories or horror in general. To have a complete conclusion where all the threads get tied up in a nice bow. And I don't know if this is getting ahead or not, but I absolutely love the story reason for why these ghosts are here and why they get sucked into this and they can't leave. I felt like it was very unique and original. Um, I don't know if you want to get into it right now,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
okay. So I'll talk about it. And this is actually it kind of ties in with one of the only problems that I have with the show. So the show is chugging along until that second to last episode, in episode 8, where
Hmm.
you basically get the backstory for how this all began. And it has that one character. She's like, what is she, like a duchess or some kind of royalty whose father died and left her and her sister the house.
Hmm.
And she ends up getting very, very sick. And they keep talking about her will to just stay alive and to keep going. And she refuses to die, but she also refuses to kind of live. She's not healthy enough to live. And so eventually, this sister, puts her out of her misery and suffocates her, and she dies. But that will is still there, and they describe her as this gravity well. Her soul is this gravity well at this place, and it traps all the other souls that die there at this place. And I just absolutely love that story element. But again, the problem though that I had with this one particular episode is that we had such great momentum and we had such a great cliffhanger going into at the end of episodes. God, they milk it twice. So at the end of episode 6, we have a cliffhanger, and then we don't get resolution on episode 7 from that, and then episode 8, all that momentum is derailed to tell this backstory. And my only suggestion on this, and I'll see if you agree with me or not, is that they should have broken up that backstory with her, with that what was she, like a royalty, some type of royalty woman. They should have broken that story up with her over the course of all the episodes, and we should have gotten to the point with her finally dying and becoming a spirit in the house right before that second to last episode. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. So I think she was just a lady of the manor, right? So if you were a landowner and you had an estate, you were a lord and lady. Um,
Ah,
for her, I get what you're talking about, because the end of the previous episode is they milk. You're right. They milk him. The end of that episode's the lady lake. She grabs Danny by the throat and she's dragging her to the lake, and that's the end of the one episode. And the beginning episode you're talking about, she's dragging her to the lake
mhm.
by the throat, and then it goes into flashback mode. And at the end of that episode, she's dragging her to the lake
Yeah,
again,
yeah, they
right?
milk
So
it twice.
I get it,
Yeah.
I get it. But here's the thing about it. So I don't think it needed to be broken up. I felt like that episode was very fairy tale like. I liked that it was in black and white. I did like the fact that it told a story that was engaging enough that you start to put together some things before they're spelled out for you. Um,
Mm.
I actually started thinking halfway through that episode, the sister is the one that Peter, held up in the attic when he was,
Yes.
showing her. I remember thinking that to myself, like that dress is very familiar. So I thought that was very cool. I liked what they did with Viola, that character. They made her, you respected the fact that she was just this force to be reckoned with, but man, you really felt how overbearing she was and how stubborn she was, and just they did such a good job of selling that character. And I think, you know, Flanagan's very keen on using the same actors for his different projects. Yeah, I'm glad that
Mhm.
he brought in one of his regular actors for that role, which makes me wonder in those other scenes where she doesn't have a face, is it that actress that's actually doing that, where she's dragging the people where she doesn't have a face, or maybe did they get a body double
Like a
because they
stunt
didn't?
woman.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes me wonder, right? Because I hope it was be the same one. I guess it doesn't matter if it's not, but I don't mind that it wasn't broken up. I thought it was. I get what you're saying. It does stop the momentum for it, but I would much rather them slow things down to start making things pay off and explain these plot threads, rather than kind of keep that momentum and not resolve anything, which is what so many other shows do. And I would say
Mhm.
to a degree that's what Hill House did as well. Hill House still resolved a lot of stuff. It just didn't resolve everything because it didn't slow down enough towards the end. So
Yeah.
for me, I think the trade-off was worth it. I can understand why it wouldn't be for people, but I do think the character arcs. I guess, let's talk about that, because the character arcs in the show I think were really fascinating. So oddly enough, the character I feel that grows the least in the show, or I'd say she has like these little mini blips of development, is the main character Danny,
Mhm.
because we see like about halfway through the series she finally confronts the specter of her former lover, and she finally accepts who she is. But she kind of, she does a lot of crying face in the whole show, right? That
Yes.
half-lidded crying face, and she,
Yes.
she did a lot of that in the last show too. So she's just really good at it, right? And that's why Flanagan probably wants her in this role, is because she's really good at crying face. But she has like these blips, right? But that being said, like the one that really fascinated me was Peter. They do
Yeah.
such a good job of making you hate this guy, and then
Yeah.
start making you more sympathetic towards him. And
And then you kind of hate him a little bit too,
right, yeah,
because
because they don't absolve him. They just make
no.
him. They make him nuanced, right? There's no excuse for what he did, whether his mother was pressuring him or not.
Right.
So
He
what he
murders like 3 people.
Right, right, and also, well, he doesn't actually. I thought that was one of the big things was surprising for me, is that they did take back the boy's death when Peter took him over, and it's like, oh, I guess he's okay after all. Um, because
Oh,
they actually had Rebecca, when she said, "What about Miles?" and she said he's gone for good or something like that. And so I was surprised that they brought him back.
yeah.
I get why they did it though, but it was really surprising for that. But I thought the development of Peter was really good. The development for Henry was really good. By the way, I think he does a passable British accent,
I
and
was gonna talk to you about that. I
yeah.
loved his British accent.
Yeah, it was good. I'm sure that there's British people that probably didn't like it, but I thought it was really good. And also too, the woman that narrates it too,
Oh,
from she was the mom in
yes.
Hill House too. So she does a great job with her British accent as well.
Carla, was it Gugino?
Yeah, she played
Gugino?
Silk Spectre.
Yes.
But I thought they were very good arcs, right? The characters
Mhm.
developed, they changed through the story. Even Danny did too. Her, she had like these more like mini blips. um, Everybody was impacted by what happened, except for the cases where the story kind of said they wouldn't be impacted by them, which was the whole point of the story.
Yep.
um, Felt like that was all really really well done and really smart, and I was actually really shocked at how the main plot line in the last episode wraps up like before even the halfway mark in the episode. I'm like, what is going on? Like, how are they going to fill up the rest of this hour? And
Right.
we pretty much get this epilogue right through the rest of it. And um it was interesting to me. That was really it was an interesting epilogue where I was very curious what happened with the characters, and I even started thinking halfway through, well, what about Owen? What about the kids? And then like they go and visit Owen, and he starts talking about the kids, and it felt like Flanagan kept, or whoever it was that wrote it, kept answering the questions right after I asked them mentally, and they were conducting that episode as if somebody that would want to have those answers.
Right.
Um, the
Like they did a
downs
test audience and they were like, "Okay, what questions do you have?" And then they answered all of them in the script in the final episode.
Well, I would say
It's
hopefully that's just good writing and not a
no,
test
it
audience,
is.
right?
No, it
But
is. It is. Yeah.
but I would say the interesting thing for all of that is that they slowed down the tempo quite a bit. And what happened was because they removed a lot of that mystery because they answered so much stuff, ultimately ends up being less scary in the end.
Mhm.
And then they give you the whole, they say it's not a ghost story, it's a love story. And I get that that's the subverted expectations for it, but it was interesting for that for me because my wife was not, super into it towards in the second half of it, but even she started leaning forward a little bit in that last episode, and she did care, about the fate of the different characters, and
Mhm.
I do think that they could have hid some of that stuff in they could have hid some of that stuff in the beginning, like the guy, the family friend could be Owen because Owen already looks like he's a guy in his 40s,
Right.
in the show. So they could have, I think, maybe aged him a little bit, and just not shown him as much and had the same actor for him. I think could have been really good.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that same thing too for the narrator. Maybe
I
um,
figured out who she was like 3 episodes in. I
Oh, see,
was
I
like,
didn't
"Okay."
I didn't figure that out at all because I didn't
Oh,
know. I guess I was still under the expectation the entire time that it was gonna be more of a tragic tale and not gonna have a tidy bow ending, right?
well, I just tied the brunette with British accent, and I'm like, "Okay, who do we have in the story that's a brunette with a British accent?" Oh, we only have one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just keep speaking of, by the way, I do think the woman that played Jamie did a really good job too. I would say
Yeah.
um that going back to that relationship between Jamie and Danny, I felt that. I felt that they really cared for each other and I was
Mhm.
actually say most there was a kind of a theme in this film for intoxicating relationships, and I felt that. I felt like Jamie and Danny were two people that couldn't get enough of each other. It developed into that. It wasn't like that originally, which I think was really smart. And then Rebecca and Peter was again the same thing because we see for Peter, we see him get overbearing in that relationship really
Oh,
early,
yeah.
and they villainize him, right? But then you see how Rebecca goes back to him for that. So again, I mean, obviously that's not a healthy relationship, but it's still a relationship nonetheless. And it was very compelling to see, on the screen, and then of course too with Henry and Charlotte, where again, it's I don't I'm not a huge fan of cheating in movies and TV shows, or just I typically find it really hard to sympathize with cheaters in movies and TV.
Mhm.
And they did a really good job at really making me um, sympathize with Henry a little bit. I would say the evil Henry thing was unneeded for me. The evil him was just very over the top,
It
and
was, but they
yeah,
needed someone for him to talk to because he wouldn't confide in
right.
anyone,
That's
any of
exactly
these
why they did
things.
it. Yeah, they did it for
Yeah.
a sounding board, a way
Mhm.
for exposition and all that. But I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah, but it did feel over the top, and I would say that's probably where his accent was a little bit. I don't know, like a mustache twirling villainy, you know, in
Yeah.
there. But overall, though, I really was surprised in this show. I feel like a lot of people are probably going to have a more of a tepid response to it. There's probably going
Mhm.
to be a lot of middling reviews for it. A lot of people are going to feel let down, and that's a sad thing. Is I don't feel like they should be. Um, and,
Yeah, if this came first, I think it would've probably hit audiences a lot better, but being that Hill House came first, and they had expectations of more of the same, and then to get something that's a little bit more romantic, fairy tale-like, I could see why they would be a little bit disappointed in that. I wasn't, I sure wasn't. I loved it, but
yeah.
you know how audiences are.
Well, here's the big question for you again. We covered this in the last episode for Near Dark and John Carpenter's Vampires. The kids. I know that bad kid actors can really break and hurt something for you. What did you think of the kids?
perfectly splendid. No, I thought I thought they were good. I thought they were really good. The episode that Miles gets by himself, I thought was excellent. I thought he did a great job in that. Um, you know right out of the gate that he's doing these terrible things at school so he can get back to his sister, and I felt like it was all incredibly believable. Like his performance was believable. One thing I noticed is that when the other people get possessed by the spirits, they take on the accent of the spirit that's possessing them. And they didn't bother doing that with Miles, probably because it might not be easy for a child actor to just hop into a what is it, a Scottish accent that
Hmm.
Peter has. That's the only thing that I noticed, but it's not a dig on his performance at all. So with Flora, same thing. She doesn't have the range that Miles had. She wasn't asked to go those great lengths that Miles would. She basically is one note the entire movie, but still great performance. You care about her. She's adorable, even if she does say things are splendid about 100 times.
Well, that was the point, right? They wanted
Right.
you to really they wanted to make you that creepy when there was the revelation. Um,
I
the
wanted that was the big miss for me too. By the way, I want to say that at the end, the adult version of her, I was totally waiting for her to say that it's perfectly splendid, and they didn't do it. So
Yeah, well, I think that's the reason why they didn't do it was because then she would have realized that it was about her, right? I think that they
yeah.
wanted that deniability to it. But the the thing with Flora, or the kids specifically, the accents, I didn't feel like anybody took on the different accents when they were had a ghost hop into them. That's interesting. I did notice that the kids didn't change the accents. Um, I was shocked for that, and but that's interesting to hear that. Who else did take on an accent that you remember?
Yeah, so, God, who was it? So the previous teacher, she hops in to who is it? And then the accent totally changes. She hops
Well,
into
Peter hops into her, but she didn't have a Scottish accent when that happened, did she?
I think she did because I remember making note of it, like, "Oh, she sounds totally different now."
Oh, got it. Yeah, I felt like the kids were did such a good job. I do think that they leaned into the I think there's probably, as Americans, we are probably a little bit more creeped out by the little British kids than British people are, right? Just because they're probably just used to it. But the kids spoke in a very articulate, almost an older,
Mhm.
almost arcane way, and it was
Very proper.
interesting. Right, right, but it wasn't just like normal proper. It was like almost like a timeless quality to it. So the way that the kids were was really interesting to me, and the way that they conveyed the roles very well. I do feel the boy, I agree with you. The boy was a little bit, better in the role than the girl. I do. I did immediately wonder why the adult Flora, or whatever her name is, middle name's Flora, didn't have the accent. But then I remember that she was raised in America, after that, and so it was interesting. I think that there could have been a line for Miles or something like that, something where I think it would have um, helped tie things together a little bit. But the kids did a good job. The boy Miles did a better job. He did a really good job of when Peter was hopped into him to show that something was up, right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
the girl, though, I felt like she was just acting like herself, right? And then it
Yeah,
was
she
kind
was
of,
100% herself.
but the reason
Yeah.
why that was is because the big reveal, right? That she was pretending. So they didn't want it to be
Yes.
super different and then suddenly have it not be different and nobody noticed, right?
Right.
So that was good. Um, but yeah, I think that it was there was definitely more to it though. So I did talk about earlier that almost everything was tied up. Um, when Flora's hiding in the wing of the house, that they're not supposed to go into, and
Mhm.
somebody's like making a noise, and you look and you see, the blurry image behind whatever. Was that the girl, the aunt without the face, or was that a different
Yes.
ghost? Because it looked like it was a creepier ghost in that scene than what I remembered for the person without a face.
I'm pretty sure that it was the sister
Okay.
of yeah, whoever what was the name of that?
Viola,
Viola.
yeah, Viola and
Yeah.
Perdita.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought the kids were great though. I thought Owen was really good too. I think that the relationship between him and Hannah was really good. Hannah, I immediately saw my wife and I, commented that she doesn't eat or drink anything. I do think there's a little bit of fuzziness there of how she can interact with everything, right? So,
Yeah.
and still be dead because at that point it's like, okay, well, is there no downside to being dead if you don't know you're dead, right? So that was interesting to me. And let's talk about the time hopping stuff. So,
Yeah.
because this is a kind of a gimmick that was in Hill House as well, where they kind of go through different times and stuff like that to tell the story. What did you think of that? The Hannah episode and the general concept of going back into a memory and then the memory can subtly change to have the conversation, but you're really talking to you. And what did you think of that concept?
I thought it was great. I thought it was a great concept. I feel like ghost stories in general have kind of hinted at this before, that these spirits are just replaying parts of their lives over and over again, but it's never been fully fleshed out like the way it's been in this show. Sometimes they have control over it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're in a memory and they don't know that they are. I loved it. I mean, with her in particular, the way they play it at first is you think she's just, starting to get Alzheimer's or something, right? And that she just can't remember things or where she is. And then it's revealed that she's just she's dead, and she's just living through these moments over and over again. And I started to get vibes that, maybe she can influence these different times, but then it's revealed that, none of it's real, and that, yeah, she can influence things when she's in these different moments, but it's just all in her own. She's tucked away, right, into her own little universe,
Right,
and the cook that she's talking to basically explains that to her, like, I'm you. You're talking to yourself right now, and we've already done this 100 million times.
right.
So, I loved it. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I liked it a lot. I thought that concept is really interesting to me. That it makes me wonder if say they did die, does that loop stay forever, or is there something outside of that loop? I'm terrified of death in general, right? And to
Mm,
me, it was actually almost comforting to think that you could just continue to live on in a loop of a good memory or a good few memories, right?
yeah.
I would much prefer that to a void of nothingness, right? So, um, I thought it was very interesting for the concept. I again, it was um, I felt like when they were at the campfire and she had the bottle, right? I told my wife I think she's pretending to drink from the bottle, and I'm almost positive that was the intentions that she's pretending to drink from the bottle. But I think the reason why they didn't draw attention to it is because if she knew that she was pretending to drink from the bottle, then she would know that she was dead, right?
Right.
So again, maybe that was a little messy, but it was still really good. Um, I would like to talk about something I didn't like.
Sure.
I didn't like the effect of the dead boyfriend with the glowing glasses.
You
Um,
didn't? Oh, I love that.
See, when you saw it at first, you see the glimpse of him on the street in the car window,
Yeah.
um, and then you see him in the mirror and stuff like that. I felt like the glowing glasses was super cheesy to me, especially that the end of that one episode where you see his full face with the glowing glasses too. I
Yeah.
understand why they did it because with the story, it makes sense in the context of the story. I just was never creeped out in any of those scary moments because of the effect of him. I felt like they could have done something that was creepier and scarier to me. So it
It worked
reminded me
on
a lot.
me.
Oh, really? That
It
was
worked.
creepy for you?
Yeah, yeah, that was the lighted glasses and not being able to see his eyes was extra creepy for me. I don't know, and the way they would hit you with that musical whatever, they would jump in there, boom, like, anytime you'd see him for a second when she would glance into a mirror, man, it worked. It worked for
Yeah.
me.
Well, like I get like the call. It's like I think it's like a really fast horn sound effect, right? Because the
Yeah,
truck that hit him. I thought
right.
in story it makes a lot of sense, and after the reveal for that, it was really good, and I felt like that was a good flashback episode, and I really liked too where um you it felt like he was really upset when she told him, but he was understandably upset. And then she tells him that she still loves him, right? So to know that she still loves him, but she's not sexually attracted to him and stuff, and the horror that she must be going through from that, I thought that was very heavy, and that was
Oh,
such a
yeah.
good part of the story, because that's got to be a terrible situation for somebody
Oh,
to
yeah.
realize they're gay in the middle of a long-term relationship, and
They
then
did a good job of, like, conveying, like, how, like, kind of, like, pushed through this whole, like, wedding process and everything that she was. Like, you could tell they were, like, childhood friends, and they were, boyfriend, girlfriend, and they're just kinda going through the motions with that, and she slowly starts to realize that, she's just not into guys, but meanwhile, the mother is like, "You're perfect for him, you're an amazing couple, you're gonna get married, here's my dress," and it's like, how do you say no to someone like that?
right. Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing for that too is there's other films that will have the woman not want to get married, and other films will often have the woman not want to get married, and they'll put it in a lens like she's right, and they'll almost villainize the guy that wants to marry them, and we call it the Cyclops effect because James Marsden often plays the actor that's
That poor
the
guy.
the poor, boyfriend that all he wants to do is just be a
Yeah.
good boyfriend. But so other movies will do that type of thing, and this one here, it didn't do it. In fact, she had remorse, for that, and then you can tell. I love that line where she says too that she still loves him with all her heart, because it,
Yeah.
it is like love is love, and it was really interesting, that whole thing. And um, I almost when she confronts him, I almost wish that we got to see more of the confrontation at the campfire rather than
Mhm.
just to build up to the confrontation. But I understand why they didn't, because they've already hammered that point home. And I will say I'm happy they resolved that so early in the series and didn't overplay its welcome,
Right.
for that. But I do think it might not have been needed either, too. Like that you could have cut that from the story and it would have been fine in my opinion too.
Without any kind of resolution between
No,
the
I
2
I
of
mean,
them,
look,
or
it didn't have to be there in the first place, because it
Oh,
had
oh, that
it
alone.
had
Yeah.
nothing. The only thing it had to impact on the plot with, other than some jump scares, was it just showed her trepidation at getting involved with Jamie. That's it. And
Well,
there's
and
a
her motivation to come to the UK to
Right,
get
but those
away.
could have been written out in so many other ways, right? So,
Sure.
I do think do I think it's bad that was included? No, I do think though, and I'm glad they got it resolved early. I guess is my point. So it didn't overstay its welcome. So, which is really good. Um, for Henry, again another element that it's kind of like hard to know if it's needed or not is the element of him having the affair with the wife, because when you have the evil Henry confronting Henry, there's almost the implication that he has something to do with their death. And then, you find out it's not. It's just the fact that they only went on that trip because he was, a bad influence on their marriage, right?
Right.
So they kind of make it seem like, he might have nefariously done something, and then they back away from that, which the show kind of does a lot of those fake outs. They did a fake out with him for that. They did the fake out with Peter Quint too, and you find that he's a scumbag, but he's a little bit sympathetic as a scumbag, and um, so I guess they wanted to have like their little redemption arcs too, which was good. But I am super shocked that you said that it was not Mike Flanagan that directed each episode, and I guess that really makes sense for the ghost thing in the background, because I felt
Mhm.
like the directing for the ghosts and the placement of them was in Hill House was more meticulously crafted, where
Right.
it almost like in Hill House you had ghosts blurry in the background, but sometimes you actually had ghosts perfectly visible in the
Yes.
foreframe. And
Manipulating objects in the
right,
front. Yeah.
right, and you had no clue they were there until you rewatch, right? Or sometimes
Yeah.
you do see them. My wife and I had a lot of those. All the ghosts in this one were in the background. They were all
Yep.
blurry in the background, and I thought that was fine though. I did. The only time there ever was that really clear one in the front is when you see the plague doctor mask turn as she walks away in that first episode.
Mhm.
Which was really ominous and interesting. Oh, and then in the dollhouse too, that was the other thing, is the dollhouse, there were the different ghosts in the dollhouse. You see the plague doctor in the dollhouse too, and I felt that was really good, because I literally I felt the first 3 quarters of the series, I was like, "Oh, so are all the dollhouse like, dolls, are these just creepy things and those were never any payoffs?" But then by the end, I'm like, "Okay, they all were real things that were in the house," which I
Yeah.
thought was really cool.
Yeah, I don't know, the dollhouse thing was kind of it was cool, like, it was I get that it was representing everyone that was all the spirits that were in the house, and that's awesome, but I was kind of a little bit confused by the lady in the lake and her doll and how the doll would move around. I know they hint at, like, binding spirits to objects and things like that. Clearly, she's not completely bound by that doll, but does the doll move around the doll house based on where the lady in the lake is? She steps on it once on the floor by the bed, and I don't know. Did that make more sense to you?
No, it was messy, but I feel the theme was the power of believing in, the mother tells her about the talisman, right? So
Hmm.
she does the talisman for the girl. Remember, like, she doesn't freak out until Danny accidentally kicks it over or moves it.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was like a protection talisman that was there. And then when it was disrupted, then they were worried. But then sometimes they would just have her walking around anyway. I think another interesting thing that wasn't explored though with that was why can't the children just say that this woman walks the house at night?
Yeah.
I feel like maybe there could have been a little bit more better explanation for that, but at the same time too, if there was, it wouldn't have been as scary, because we would have had that. The most scary thing you can do. I'm sorry. The biggest thing you can do in a movie of robbing things of a scare is just explain what it is, right?
Right.
And
Right.
for the scariness this I'm sorry, the show has, it's all based off the unexplained, and eventually it does get explained, and it's less scary. But by then we find out it's not the point anymore.
Right.
Um, so it was definitely interesting. I really enjoyed it. So I guess we'll talk about our recommendations and whether we recommend it or not. So I'll let you go first on this one.
Sure. Definitely recommend. No caveats. If you like ghost stories, you're gonna like this. Well, okay. Hold on. Let me pull that back a little bit. A little caveat. Don't go in expecting Hill House because you're not gonna get Hill House. You're gonna get a totally different ghost story.
Yeah, yeah, I would say I recommend without caveats, but I would tell people that really enjoyed Hill House to not expect the same thing here. There are some of those elements from that some of that same DNA, but Flanagan wanted to do different things here than he wanted to do with Hill House, and
Hmm.
and keep in mind too, like even with the ghosts, right? The ghosts in Hell House were like, you got close up, scary horror moments in Hell House, and
Oh yeah.
you didn't get many of those here. So I feel like that was really it's a different aim for this one, and I would say too, the thing that was really interesting for this one, I would almost recommend this one more than Hill House for a lot of people, especially if they're not really into horror. The main reason being is because most of the characters in this are likable or are people that you like to dislike, like Peter Quint, like you love to hate
Hmm.
him, right? Whereas Hill House, everybody's going through so much trauma, like they're all a-holes to each other all the
They are.
time. So
Most
it's
dysfunctional family.
yeah, so Hill House actually goes to the point where it's like as it goes on, it's almost like worse and worse, and there's some resolution. Here, it's a situation where you really like everybody. Like there's nobody that you really hate the whole time, and even by the end, they help redeem a couple of characters too. So
Yeah.
I would say for that reason, it's definitely a lot more bearable for the average viewer. So I would say recommend without caveats, and I would say to heartily recommend to somebody that's not really into horror and maybe wants to dip their toes in a horror. I think that this or ghost story horror, I should say,
Hmm.
this is a
Hmm.
good way to dip your toes into it, and then tell them if you want to amp it up a notch, then also check out Hill House.
That's perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I enjoy my wife didn't like it, did not like it, so, I have to, rebuild some of the social capital on that one and, watch something that she wants to watch next, but I do wanna hit, The Shining and Doctor Sleep. director's cut
Yes.
as a double feature and go about that one as well. And from obviously you have glowing recommendations for Doctor Sleep, so we'll know going into that one's probably going to be a biased review, but
100%.
they
Yeah.
more discussion than a review. But there's a lot of people that will say too Doctor Sleep is the best horror property that's come out in the last 10 years, right? And it's really a
Yeah.
shame it didn't do so well. And
I know.
I hope it learns to, it gets the acclaim. Oh, and apparently, too, by the way, Mike Flanagan is doing another series with some of these same actors, too, but I don't think it's going to be in this anthology setup that he has with Netflix. I can't remember the name of the series, but it is
Oh.
coming up soon, too. So
Is
I
it gonna
think
be on Netflix or is it, totally separate from Netflix altogether?
I don't know if it's a part of the same deal. It's called Midnight Mass. I
Hmm,
don't know if it's part of the same deal for Netflix because I think that for Netflix he had the anthology. I think when Hill House took off, then they decided they were going to do Bly Manor as kind of like an American Horror Story anthology series where they had the next season. So presumably the next one, I could be wrong in this. Maybe the next one for Netflix will be another The Haunting of Blah, right?
yeah.
Whatever it is. But apparently, though, this Midnight Mass show is going to have some of the same actors in it too,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
so hopefully that'll be really good too. And oh, he also did Gerald's Game for Netflix, which I haven't
Yes.
seen yet too, so I have to watch that one as well. It's another Stephen King story.
He does
Um,
not disappoint. He has not let me down yet. In
yeah,
Flanagan we trust.
perfect. Well, it sounds like he's the modern king of horror. It seems like seriously, a lot of the other guys that were big and even the guys that were up and coming a few years ago, like James Wan and things like that, seem like they've moved on to superhero films and things like that. So, um,
Yeah.
all right. Well, hey, that is another one of the books for The Haunting of Bly Manor. Thank you so much for joining me, Sean.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. We'll catch you guys for the next one.